Is NATO coming to Asia? It's a question that many countries in the region are asking. Some say NATO is already here. They have partners in the Indo-Pacific. They're also opening an office in Japan. But what does NATO's Asian pivot mean? China is clearly unhappy about it. The defense minister made that clear at the Shangri-La dialogue. It's an annual security conference held in Singapore, like we just told you. All major powers attended. China's defense minister lashed out at NATO's Asian pivot. He said all such alliances will plunge the region into chaos. Listen to this.
In essence, attempts to push for NATO-like alliances in the Asia-Pacific are a way of kidnapping regional countries and exaggerating conflicts and confrontations, which will only plunge the Asia-Pacific into a vortex of disputes and conflicts.
Which alliances is he talking about? You have security groupings like the AUKUS and the Five Eyes Alliance. You also have more dynamic ones like the Quad. China opposes all of them. It says this is an attempt to contain Beijing's influence. Just one problem, though. These alliances did not appear out of thin air. They are a direct response to Chinese expansionism. Look at the partner countries. India is a member of the Quad. Philippines recently held four-way talks with the US, Japan, and Australia. These are not Western countries. These are Asian nations fed up with Chinese belligerence. A free and open Indo-Pacific is in their interest as well. The only question is how to achieve that. Should NATO be imported into Asia? There are indications of such an attempt, not to recruit Asian members, but to create a wider community. And India figures prominently in that plan. US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is in New Delhi. His visit comes weeks ahead of Prime Minister Modi's US trip. He's already met Defense Minister Rajnath Singh. Security cooperation topped the agenda. Talks are on to share fighter jet engine technology with India. New Delhi is also planning to buy 30 drones from the US. The deal is worth around $3 billion. It is consistent with India's long-term defense policy. Diversify purchases, build up local capabilities. But the US has something even bigger in mind. This is NATO Plus. Now, some quick facts. NATO Plus is an extended community of NATO. Right now, there are 5 members: Japan, South Korea, Australia, Israel, and New Zealand. How is this different from NATO? For starters, these countries are not Atlantic. They're Indo-Pacific and West Asian. But more importantly, there is no Article 5. Article 5 is the rule of collective defense. It does not apply to NATO Plus. And it's honestly a raw deal. You get all the responsibilities, but none of the protection. Then why bother joining it? NATO Plus offers easy intelligence sharing. It will also make military procurement easier. Say you want an American F-16 or an F-22. If you're part of NATO Plus, you could get a good deal. A US House panel wants India to be included in this setup, in NATO Plus. It's a panel that deals with China. It has the support of both Democrats and Republicans. But how should India see this offer? With a lot of apprehension. NATO Plus may not be a treaty alliance, but it's a clear sign of picking sides. If India joins NATO Plus, it would limit New Delhi's strategic autonomy. No more warm ties with Russia. Definitely no defense trade. Plus, India's relationship with the US is very different from other NATO Plus members. Australia and New Zealand fought 2 world wars on America's side. Japan and South Korea are treaty allies. Israel and the US share a special relationship, but India-US ties are very different from all of these. These warm exchanges are a recent phenomenon. Washington spent most of the last 70 years criticizing and sanctioning India, so New Delhi must be wary. It cannot become a pawn for NATO's new rivalry with China. The alliance is famous for its use and throw tactics. So the China challenge must be met on India's terms, which means no to alliance and yes to engagement. Even the US seems to be testing the waters right now. This NATO Plus idea was proposed by a US panel. It has not been officially offered by the US government. Seems like Washington was sending out feelers, trying to see what the reaction will be. So far, it's been tepid. NATO Plus comes with a lot of baggage, commitments, and demands. India would do well to steer clear. Have you heard of the phrase living in a bubble? It is used to describe someone who's isolated, disconnected from reality, someone who lives in an echo chamber. It can be used to describe the Chinese state too. They live in a bubble, fed with a daily dose of Communist Party propaganda. It's bad enough as it is, but it's dangerous when you start buying your own propaganda. Let me give you a recent example. Two Chinese experts, two Chinese officials, have given an assessment on India. They say India is no challenge for the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese army. And this is not jingoistic bombast. This is their ignorance speaking. The men who made these statements are Zhao Xiaozhu and Zhang Qi. Both hold the position of what they call senior colonel in the Chinese military. They're members of what you can call the PLA's brain trust. They work with China's leading military universities. So what they think shapes the strategy of the Chinese army. And that's why their opinion matters. Last week, the PLA sent these officials to the Shangri-La Dialogue. This is an annual security conference. It is hosted by Singapore, and it's attended by leading defense leaders and thinkers. So these PLA officials were there, and they spoke about India and the border standoff with China. I have their statements. Senior Colonel Zhao spoke about India's defense modernization. Listen to what he said. India is unlikely to catch up to China in the coming decades because of its weak industrial infrastructure, while China has built complex and systematic defense industrial platforms. And this is what his counterpart had to say. Senior Colonel Zhang, I'm quoting again, India has spared no effort in military modernization in a bid to become an impressive superpower as other countries have done. This was their opinion. They say India is lagging in defense manufacturing and hence poses no challenge to China. If this is the foundation of the PLA's military strategy, I say it's good news for India because it just demonstrates their ignorance. You see, there's a limited connection between military modernization and war preparedness. Modernization is about enhancing your country's military capabilities. It is important, yes, but only to an extent. Being ready for war involves a lot more than just having the latest and the greatest weapons. You need many other things to fight a war, like infrastructure, strategy, training, knowing the lay of the land, understanding the weakness of your adversary, and the experience of fighting and winning wars. We know that China is woefully inadequate in this department. China hasn't fought a war in more than 4 decades, so while the PLA's military may be growing, its soldiers remain untested. Most of China's military arsenal has not seen any real combat. The ability of their soldiers to use their weapons is unproven. Compare that to India. Our soldiers are in better shape, they know their weapons well, and they have combat experience. Do you know what else you need to fight a war? You need a robust economy. Now, China's economy is much bigger than India, no two ways about it. But at this point, it's too fragile to handle a war. Remember what I said about living in a bubble and buying your own propaganda? Chinese strategists are doing that. Their country is struggling with a deep debt crisis. Local governments are sinking, they owe large amounts of money, and they're running out of cash. We've been telling you about this. Last month, there was a serious crisis in Kunming. Reports said a local authority was on the verge of bankruptcy. They had to repay $170 million, but they did not have that money. So at the 11th hour, authorities issued new bonds. They were trying to raise more cash. And when these reports came out, local officials were quick to deny them. But one city after another is coming under stress. In Wuhan, they've started naming and shaming debtors. They've released hundreds of names to recover a sum of $42 million. Going by one estimate, local governments in China owe about $23 trillion. That's nearly twice the size of China's GDP. I'll repeat that. China's GDP is a little over $12 trillion. Local government debt is at a whopping $23 trillion. Can a country like this finance a war? And at what cost? Perhaps China's military thinkers should think about this. Have you heard of present bias? It's a term associated with human behavior. And what does it mean? It refers to difficulty in making lifestyle changes today to prevent a catastrophe in future. And we humans suffer from it. We are bad at addressing the risks of tomorrow because we often don't alter our behavior today. But why am I ambushing you with this reality check? Because I'm going to be talking about climate change, which is probably one of the biggest repercussions of our present bias. And why are we bringing this up tonight? Because today is World Environment Day. It is one of the biggest international days for the environment, and this tradition dates back to 1973. More than 150 countries are observing it. But what does it even mean? And can our actions, big or small, really make a difference? Our next report tells you. In New York, an art project made entirely of plastic waste. In India, a human chain along the banks of river Yamuna.
We are asking people to wake up and clean the Yamuna River.
In South Africa, food waste being recycled.
The world is in crisis. We all know about climate change, that our world is in trouble. We all have to do our bit.
3 different projects with different causes at heart, much like thousands of other campaigns in over 150 countries. But all of them talking about one thing, our environment. Because today is June 5th, World Environment Day. And this isn't just any other Monday, it is a global platform for environmental outreach. It calls for equal parts celebration and anger, all of it devoted towards the protection of this world. Each year, this day brings hope, collective action, and a much-awaited theme. And this year, the theme is Beat Plastic Pollution. It urges countries to look for solutions to plastic pollution, and that tracks. After all, the stakes couldn't be higher. We produce 430 million tons of plastic every year. Plastic waste pollution has doubled in the last decade. It is predicted to triple by 2060. Only 9% is recycled globally. Plastic pollution also has social and economic costs, which can go up to $600 billion every year. This is a crisis, and it's choking our world. Many of you may wonder, if this is such a big problem, why aren't our governments acting on it? Well, they're trying. The world could soon have a treaty to curb plastic pollution. It would be the first such legally binding global treaty. 170 countries have agreed to develop its first draft. While this sounds like too little too late, experts say it is a preliminary but crucial step. Because the world has deferred climate action for so long, and not just at the policy level, but also at a personal level. Our governments have certainly not done enough for climate change, but neither have we. Often what stops us is one common but vexing question. Can one person's actions really make a difference? If you have asked this before, you're not alone. The problem is so big, and our daily plastic use seems quite small. But personal action is inextricably linked to international cooperation. Without individual effort, there is no collective action either. If individuals hadn't come together, the Sunrise Movement wouldn't have camped out in the halls of US Congress, or India's iconic Chipko movement wouldn't have made waves. Climate action needs crusaders, a sea of them. So while we are scared for our future, our actions in the present must be loud. And no, that doesn't mean that you have to go on the streets holding banners demanding climate action. And if going cold turkey on plastic is too daunting, take the first step and minimize its use. Do other simple things, like stop wasting food and reduce your car use. Save fuel and save the planet as well. And it's not too late to make a difference. Of course, we also need ambitious government policies because we've already dangerously warmed the planet. Some parts of the world are burning, others are drowning. Some have off-season snowstorms and others are desertifying. The world is on fire, literally. So every day should be our own environment day. It may feel like a lost cause, But the future isn't set in stone. A different future remains possible, and it is up to us to decide which one plays out. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with India, an under-construction bridge collapsed in the state of Bihar. This particular bridge collapsed for the second time in 14 months. In Indonesia, worshippers climbed to the top of an active volcano to perform a religious ceremony. And June is the Pride Month. In Thailand, members of the LGBTQ community held a pride parade in Bangkok. And finally, what makes the 5th of June significant? We're taking you back in history. On this day in 1967, a 6-day war began in West Asia. This war was fought between Israel and Arab states, the states of Egypt, Jordan and Syria. The brief but bloody battle was a result of years of diplomatic friction. The war ended with a UN-brokered ceasefire, but it changed the map of West Asia. Leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.